the self-proclaimed mastermind of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, and 4 alleged co-conspirators are being brought back to New York to stand trial in the shadow of what once was the World Trade Center. Attorney General Eric Holder defending that decision today, saying, and I quote, "They should be tried where their crimes occurred." Now, we're going to be getting reaction from a 9/11 family member in a moment, someone who's not too happy with this decision. But first, to Rudy Giuliani himself in this exclusive chat. The former New York City mayor was among the first responders to those September 11th attacks. Joins her right now with a reaction. What do you think?
I think this is a very dangerous decision and an irresponsible one, and one that is absolutely unnecessary. Meaning, if Khalid Sheikh Mohammed couldn't be tried anywhere else but in New York, then of course New York would handle it and do it. New York is already a target for terrorists. We announce that every day and talk about it every day. To add something unnecessary to that makes no sense, and the president has made a, I believe, irresponsible decision. And finally, this was an act of war. And one of the things I thought we learned from September 11 was that we were in a state of denial before September 11. We went through this once before. 1993, we had terrorists attack the World Trade Center. We did not recognize it as an act of war. We tried them in the Southern District of New York. It did no good. We were attacked in Africa. We were attacked at those embassies in Africa. We were attacked on the USS Cole. And then we had the worst attack in our history. And I hoped and prayed from that day on it would be the last Islamic terrorist attack in our history. And it was not the last, because a week ago we had another Islamic terrorist attack on our soil. And why this administration has trouble figuring that out when the man yelled out Allah Akbar when he was murdering people, as a former prosecutor, I find frighteningly incompetent.
Obviously, they must know in advance that even doing this on our soil and in New York is going to be a provocative action. So on that level alone, what do you think?
Because they have elevated to a point of, I believe, irrationality, process over safety. I mean, this was an act of war by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his co-conspirators. They attacked us like Pearl Harbor. This may be a different kind of enemy, but it's just as dangerous, just as insidious, and this should be treated as an act of war. President Bush recognized that. We went through a decade or so of not treating Islamic terrorism as acts of war. Bin Laden declared war on us, and we didn't hear it. We were in a state of denial before September 11, except at least before September 11, the administrations that existed then didn't have the experience of September 11. But I believe once September 11 happened, Republican and Democrat would never go back to where we were before in that foolish state of denial. A nation that cannot face its enemies is a nation that's in danger.
So when Eric Holder says he would probably be pursuing the death penalty, it does little to...
Well, you think of the vagaries of the criminal justice system? I mean, you're going to have motions to dismiss the case. You're going to have motions for change of venue. I mean, you want to think of a place where you better than New York, where you couldn't get a fair trial for the people who attacked the World Trade Center? I mean, it was the biggest news story of the decade, one of the biggest of the century. I had a case of much less publicity involving corruption in New York City in 1986 that got so much publicity that venue had to be changed to Connecticut, where I had to go try it personally. That case got 1/10 of the publicity that this case got.
So you think it's very unlikely that New York would be able to be the venue anyway?
Criminal defense lawyers are going to have the obligation to try and get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed acquitted. That is
could they also?
That is their obligation.
They could also throw this out on a technicality, right? There's a waterboarding issue.
They have an obligation, an ethical obligation, to raise every issue that requires the United States government to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. If it's a 50-50 case, he's supposed to get acquitted. If there are mistakes that have been made in the processing of this case by the government, it is conceivable that evidence will be suppressed. It's even, I don't believe it will happen, but it's not inconceivable the case could be thrown out for procedural infirmity.
What would throw it out?
I don't know. I have no idea what they did. I have no idea how much...
but, I mean, this would then become a case not so much about Khalid, it would be about what he endured. Right? Then they turn it around, right?
Don't you think the activists are going to use this? I mean, the United States government is going to try to put Khalid Sheikh Mohammed on trial. The defense lawyers are going to try to put the United States government on trial.
But are they really going to be putting George Bush on trial?
Well, I mean, he was the president of the United States. And I'll say this for President Bush. He kept us safe from Islamic terrorist attack every day he was president.
But isn't this about could it be about looking at the procedures he used?
Maybe somebody should note that it only happened after he left office on our soil, and that an administration is still having difficulties, days later, figuring out that this was an Islamic terrorist attack. Bin Laden has instructed people to carry out leaderless attacks like Hassan carried out. It is right in their game plan. The almost attack on Fort Drum was such an attack, not necessarily ordered, but carried out in the name of the jihad. That's precisely what Hassan did. It doesn't take a genius to figure it out.
So let me ask, when your successor, Michael Bloomberg, says, I support the Obama administration's decision to prosecute the 9/11 terrorists here in New York, it is fitting that 9/11 suspects face justice near the World Trade Center site where so many New Yorkers were murdered. What do you make of that?
I disagree with it. It is fitting that the 9/11 murderers be treated as war criminals because it was an act of war. This was not just another murder in the city of New York that year. This was an act of war and an act of terror. They should be prosecuted. They should be prosecuted in a military tribunal. We would not have tried the people who attacked Pearl Harbor in a civilian court in Hawaii for what they did. And it's not just the danger that it brings to New York for unnecessary reasons. Again, if this was the only option, then the mayor is right. We should do it in New York. It is not the only option. There's a whole ideological, political decision-making behind why it's happening here. And
well, what do you mean by that?
What that I mean is everybody's more concerned with what people are going to think of us, what the rights of terrorists should be. And believe me, in a criminal trial, the rights of terrorists are more important than anything else. I mean, our criminal justice system is geared to let guilty people go free if there's any doubt. That's the way it is. That better to have 9 guilty go free than 1 innocent person convicted. Very different situation when you're at war. So when we see all of these procedural problems that are going to be created over the months and years that this could take, with these terrorists sitting here, I think we're going to realize that this was a terrible, terrible mistake.
Leaving aside just the trial, if it happens here, you fear that this could also become a provocative event for those who would wish us harm, right? So in other words, if he were to get sentenced, there might be some problems here, and New York becomes a target all over.
Here's the way I would put it. There are plenty of reasons why New York is a target already.
This just heightens it.
And these things are necessary and to some extent out of our control. Why take a risk with another one if you don't have to? And explain to me why you have to when he could be tried as a war criminal in Guantanamo. Now, and what happens?
Well, if you're shutting down Guantanamo,